Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today's episode, my guest is Collette Portis. She's originally from Michigan, which is where we're from here, but she lives down in Texas now. She has a great story. I usually ask about an entrepreneur's journey as to how they got to where they are, and she's got a really cool story about how long she's been running businesses since she was 14 years old. And then how she got into her current business and how it's morphed into a variety of things. She's got some great little nuggets about how to think about things. So if you're an entrepreneur who is doing fine and maybe a little bit stuck on some things, she's going to share some ideas that might help you just take a look at it through a different lens and help you make a pivot or help you do with a breakthrough. She's got a great opportunity for you to go to the website and download something that will give you that a little bit clearer way to create some checklists for yourself. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another fun and educational episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So Collette, thank you for taking some time to jump on the podcast today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you for having me, Walter. I'm excited, and I'm really interested in what kind of cigar you're smoking over there.
Appreciate the little intro. This is one of the finds I have from my trips to Florida. Let's see, it's hard to see. It's got a little metallic band. It's a Sosa. It's a Sosa family. So they have a factory down in Miami, and they have a retail store in Miami, and then they have one at Disney. In Disney Springs, Disney Springs is what they call it now. So it's like when my daughter was little and my wife and mother-in-law would like to go like shopping around looking at all the Disney stuff, I could go plant myself at the Sosa cigar shop in downtown Disney and have a cigar. Everybody was happy.
Sounds like a good time.
So we'll get to cigars in a couple of minutes, but so why don't we talk a little bit about, start off with like sharing your journey, your story as to how you got to where you are, because you've got a pretty exciting business going, and you're doing some fun stuff. So how'd you get here? That's always a fun story.
So I always have to start by saying I come from a family of crazy people. What do you mean by crazy people, Colette? Entrepreneurs, business owners, crazy people. Same thing, right? In the dictionary, it should say crazy people, and then it should say entrepreneurs, it should say
I
business
hear
owners.
that.
I come from a family of my dad, my mom, both sets of grandparents, aunts, uncles. So it's in my blood. It's like, it's just what I do, right?
Love it.
But um, Walter, they told me to go to college, get a degree, get a good job, paying a pension. What is that? And then retire,
Hmm.
And me being who I am, I was the kid that listened because I was not getting a whooping. That was not going to happen. So I was going to listen to whatever you told me. And so although I started my first business at 14,
What
I graduated high
what
school at
what did you do at
17.
14? Tell me what you did at 14.
I did hair at 14. Both of my aunts owned salons. And
Okay.
so before 14, I had to help sweep and wash hair and all of that. And while I was in that environment, I learned what to do. So all of my girlfriends came to me to do their hair. And let me tell you something, I made good money. I knew how to make $500 on Thursday, $500 on Friday, $500 on Saturday morning, because Saturday afternoon it was time to go to the mall and buy shoes, and I knew how to do it.
500 bucks a day for like that at 14? That's huge.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, this
It's a
did
lot
you
of
not hear the
it's a lot of
priority,
shoes.
Walter? Yes,
How
exactly.
many closets of
I mean,
shoes do we have now?
um, I'm gonna plead the
Mm.
fifth.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might.
No, I'm a lot more controlled now than I was then. Because by the time I was 16, I was at the mall every single day. They were getting my
Mm.
money at the mall. But so I started the business at 14. I learned very quickly how to manage my time. I had a book appointments, like everything. I was set up with a full shop. By the time I graduated high school at 17, I was 2 classes away from getting my associate's degree. I went to college, spent 20 years, Walter, in college.
20 years?
Got, yes,
Okay.
20 years in college.
So,
I got 6 degrees.
holy crap.
And I wasn't a millionaire. And I said, somebody lied. Somebody lied. I don't know who that somebody is, but somebody didn't tell me the truth, because there was not $1 million at the end of that rainbow.
Wow.
And then I went back to my first love. I left my corporate job making really, really, really great money. I just couldn't do it anymore. I felt like my body was going to implode if I sat in that seat one more time.
You feel constrained, right?
Oh my God. Like I don't, if you know how you see the cartoon where they wrap all the chains around the person, but they leave their head unwrapped. My head wasn't even unwrapped. Like, I was completely wrapped in chains, and I couldn't, I felt like I really wasn't going to survive if I stayed any longer. And so I was living in Florida at that time. I moved back to Texas. And I moved back to Texas as I had just finished my master's, and I moved back to Texas, and I was like, I'm amazing, so I'm gonna get the best job in the world. A year later, still no work, run out of all of my savings, and then I'm crying, and I'm going, God, I gotta pay this cell phone bill today, or they're gonna turn it off. And I got a very, very, very simple answer. And God said, do what I told you to do 15 years ago. And then I was scared. Like, I was literally shaking in my boots, but I had no other options. And so it was like, okay. Now, what I didn't tell you was when I moved back, I came back to take care of my parents because they were sick. So I was living in their house, making sure they were okay. I never left my bedroom that morning. I never told anybody I was starting the company. I started the business with negative $27 in my bank account, a cell phone bill that had to be paid that day or they were going to cut it off because they had already given me 2 payment arrangements, and a laptop that I was using to take my classes, right? Started my graphic design and branding firm. I got 7 clients that day, never called anybody.
7 clients?
Just people, 7. Just people calling me and saying, can you do this? Will you do that? Because I had been designing websites and stuff like that since I was 12. So people knew that I could design. And so that company, that's how I got to the place where I was full-time in business. I didn't have an option, and I didn't have money. And so I had to use what I had in my hand in order to survive. And
no plan B, right?
I did that. I was out of plan B. I was out of plan D. Plan A, B, C, and D. We tried all of those, and they had all failed me. And this was no plan at all. This was sheer submission to what I already knew I was supposed to be doing, but I was afraid to do it because I was accustomed to, I had been working since I was 14. I started working for the federal government. I was getting 2 cost of living raises at 14 a year. You know, I had my business, so I was making $1,500 a week plus working a job at the federal government and going to school. So I was so accustomed to the security of being able to care for myself and provide for myself whatever I wanted and needed, right? So the thought of walking away from that and having to depend on customers and having to figure out how to acquire them out of necessity as opposed to out of just wanting to do this because I like it, totally different things. So I was afraid. Well, in that case, I was more afraid of dying of starvation than I was of striking out and starting my business. And so I did that. And then that design firm morphed into me coaching. And I started coaching at 16. It's crazy. My first client was a colonel in the military because of the work that I did in the federal government. And so I had always done that. And so what I realized in my design firm is that my work was dying. And from one year to the next year, my work was gone. And that was because companies didn't know how to
Right.
survive. And so I just started using the tools that I learned, through working for the federal government and all of the corporate jobs that I had to help them survive. And a lot of those companies 8 years later are still with me. Um, and so I that's what I did. And then that turned the coaching side got so big I had to separate the two. And then that then morphed into a publishing company. And then I ended up having to separate that. So now I find myself 8 years later, um, fully engulfed in my business, having built the other two companies, and they do what they do. And then I sit at Red as the CEO and master business coach, and that's my journey and how I got here.
Well, that's a hell of a story, Colette. It, but there's a part of it that I think everybody's journey is unique. Everybody's, path is different. But as entrepreneurs, it always seems like there's a moment where we have to decide to believe in ourselves and take that step. And it's at different points for different people, and it looks different. But that's usually the common thread. I mean, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they've kind of like, screw it, I'm doing this, right? Sometimes that's the attitude. Sometimes it's more like your story, like, I got to go do this because I got to pay the phone bill, right? I got to go do this. It but it's always like it's the leap to believe in yourself, and sometimes we struggle to do that, and we don't realize that we have all of this intellectual property in our head that's there, and we don't really put value on it until we start to talk about stuff, and it's like, wow, I kind of know more than I thought I did, and I'm actually helping people. And if we could go back and tell our younger self, just believe in yourself a little bit more and take that step. I mean, I had a job that I was really good at, but I hated. Right? I hated the culture. I hated the company. I liked the customers. I just didn't like being there. And I was making a lot of money, and I just got fed up with it and took a leap. And it's that moment that you kind of become an entrepreneur with the capital E. And the other thing you said, I think that resonates with a lot of people, is that you feel constrained sitting in that desk where you're not in charge, or you see a better way, or you think it's a better way and you'd like to try it, but you don't have the ability to. I mean, there's a couple of threads there that there's always seems to be the same piece with entrepreneurs. And you talk to a lot of business owners. Is that a common theme that you run into with people as to how they got to where they are?
Yeah, one of the things that I know about business is there's two kinds of people in business. There are those who want to do it, and there are those who have to do it. And there's a difference. Those of us who want to do it, and that doesn't mean that those who have to do it don't want to do it. They want to do it as well, but they don't see an option. Nothing, there's no other option outside of being in business for themselves. Those who want to do it every day they get to decide if this is what they want to do today. And they don't necessarily aspire to become a CEO. They want to make some money. They want to help some people. They don't want to lose their sense of security as a result of being in business. They wanted to provide some additional security for them. But then there's those of us who have no choice. This is what we have to do. And because it's what we have to do, we understand that it could mean losing, no, it does mean losing all sense of
Yeah.
security. But if I keep going, the level of security and the level of sense of security that I will have in the future is going to far outweigh anything I could have had working towards someone else's dream. And that's where I am. And when you're that I have to do it type of person, between year 2 and 3 is when you finally sit down one day and you look back. Somebody says something to you, or you look at something, or something comes across the timeline or something, and you go, oh my God, I did that. And you go, oh, what? I did that? And you go, what the hell? I did that? And then you're like, you know what? I got this. And there's nothing else that I can do in the world. There's nothing else I will do in the world. This is who I am, and this is what I do. And you're relentless.
I couldn't agree more. You believe that you can do it, you go do it, and then it's like, holy crap. Like, I'm really doing it, and it's really valuable, and it's really helpful. It kind of just manifests itself at some point, right? Whether it's 6 months in, 3 months in, or 3 years in, it happens. I was talking to, she's the head of the EO Detroit, the group, and she described, she goes, I am unemployable at this point in my life.
Yes.
Right? She's always been an entrepreneur. She's always done crazy stuff. When you talked about the entrepreneur that's a little crazy, that just is out there, that's Jenny. She's always been taking risks, and somebody asked her to do something, and she's like, sure, I can do that, and then she goes and figures out how to do it. And I was like, that's a great definition of an entrepreneur, is that we're just really unemployable in the true sense of the word. Like, we're always going to be somebody that's challenging the status quo. We're gonna be looking at, is that the best way to do that? Sometimes we get in our own way though, because we keep trying to dial that in, and I think that's a good segue for what you can do to help entrepreneurs, from a planning point of view and a strategy point of view. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you approach that when you have that entrepreneur who's like, I'm kind of at a point where I need to scale, but it's me, and I need to get out of a couple of seats and focus on this part. Talk a little bit about your approach and how you help in using all of that craziness from your past to help them get over that hump.
Yes. Walter, one of the things I say about myself is I am psychologically unemployable. You do not want me as your employee. I'm just telling you right now. Because I got ideas.
I hear you.
You're trying to steer this ship one way, and I'm like, but do you know there's a shorter way? I'll just take the steering wheel and get us there. And you're like, yeah, but that's not how this works. One of the first things I do with clients when they come on, I ask them, because they're entrepreneurs. And one of my beliefs is, as an entrepreneur, God can trust you with ideas. And because he can, he'll keep giving them to you. Well, one of the struggles for entrepreneurs is we think we're supposed to take every idea and launch it today. And it's like, yeah, today's not launch day for all of them. So one of the things I do first is say, what are all of these ideas that you have? What are all of these things you're touching? Okay, now I need you to get a notebook, because some of those ideas go in the back of the notebook. Because they're not for today's launch. They're for another day's launch. But we're going to figure out what the 2 to 3 things are right now that are launched now things. And as these 2 to 3 things grow, they will tell you what to go get from the back of the book and when to launch that thing. All of these things are connected. Remember, I said I started with my design firm, which required then that I coached my clients so that their businesses would stay alive, which then grew into my clients needing to tell and share their stories. So that turned into a publishing company. One idea connected to the other idea and said, okay, it's time, which connected to the other idea, which said, okay, it's time. So when I'm coaching clients, I'm coaching them in that way. Put this thing here for a moment, and then everything else will tell us when we need to come back and get that, because it's a tool, it's a resource, it's something you're going to need in the future, just not right now. And if you try to use it right now immaturely, then you're using the back of the hammer to drive a nail, which is going to put a hole in the wall, which is not what you want. You don't want that big of a hole in the wall, and you're going to hurt your hands. Right. Well, but if you wait until the appropriate time, you'll use the tool the right way so that you can get the results that you're supposed to get. So we're going to start with that. And then we're going to look at those 2 to 3 things and go, okay, now in what order should we be doing these 2 to 3 things? Because again, launch day is for one thing, not a bunch of things. We've got to focus. So for instance, when we develop a strategic plan with a client, we do it for a period of 12 months. We're not building a strategy for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Do we have an outlook for that? Sure. Yes. We know where the company wants to go. But when we're developing strategy, it is over the next 12 months. Who do we want to focus on? What do we want to focus on? What problem are we solving? Who do we want to solve this problem for? What do we know about them? We know Walter likes cigars, right? If I am starting a company with spray that like Febreze or something like that, then if Walter's my customer, I need to go learn as much as I can about Walter. Because guess what? Walter might not want something that sprays as heavy as Febreze, right? Mm-hmm. But he might want something that mists. Well, Collette might want something that sprays a little bit heavier. But if we don't spend the time knowing that, then how do we become the best servant? Because my belief about business owners and entrepreneurs is, at the baseline, we are problem solvers and servants. That's it. If we understand that, then we approach it a little bit different, because it's like, okay, who has the problem so that I can solve it? And while I'm solving that problem, I need to know that I have to serve this to you in a certain mm-hmm. way. Because if ever you have that problem again, my hope is that you come back to me to solve that problem. And so a lot of times what we see is companies and we see this in large and small companies every day. We see companies lose sight of that. I was just thinking about earlier a company that I do business with, and I thought today, like, I need to probably email the CEO of this company and say, your team is just not happy. Like, they're just not happy working for you. And let me give you a couple of examples, because that's the kind of crazy stuff I do, right? But let me give you a couple of examples, because I know that whatever this business is, it's attached to somebody's dream. And I don't want to see your dream die because your culture is, toxic, or your processes aren't right, or you don't have a vision for it. And if you do, you haven't shared it with your people, so they don't even know where you're going. Mm-hmm. So, my brain is like, let's throw them a lifeline here and say, hey, wake up. One of your customers is saying to you, your employees are happy. But a lot of that comes from developing your strategy for winning. And if you're developing that strategy for winning, and one of the first things you do is not to, if at first you don't look at how to make sure you're right and in the situation, and then secondarily your team is right and supported and healthy in the situation, everything else will go away if those two things aren't good. But oftentimes we don't see that as the focus. And so what we will see, though, is customer number one. That is the focus. And it's like, yeah, but if you're unhealthy, right, what you will give away, it's 9 times out of 10 going to be unhealthy. Let's get you healthy first, so that what you give away is good and nutritious and healthy.
So getting that alignment with Making sure the CEO communicates their vision with their own team, making sure that that's really clear. And I think entrepreneurs will occasionally have trouble with that, getting that alignment with and communicating those what that really means. And what I've noticed, and I'm curious your thoughts here, that they don't help their employees see how they deliver whatever it is that they're asking them to deliver. Like you have authority as an employee at your level of function to do these things because that helps us achieve our mission. And just because they have some posters on the wall and they talk about core values doesn't necessarily mean that that helps the employee understand, well, what do I do as a shipping clerk, right? That can have a huge impact on a company, right? That person can really make or break the end of that sales cycle if they don't understand that they get to pull a product because they don't think it looks right or because there's a problem with it and get in front of that. And I've seen it happen when that person understands that they're part of the machine and they have this authority. And entrepreneurs sometimes miss that, making those connections for those people. And they're usually hesitant to do that because they're not entrepreneurs. They're not willing to share their ideas as easily as we are. And they don't raise their hand when they don't understand something. So, that speaks to the culture issue, right? Because that's a big part of that. And then delivering that, they're serving their customers, but they got to serve their employees. And so important. I love it.
Your employees are just another customer segment for you. And if we understand that, then we manage that relationship a little bit differently. One of the things that we do is before we start making suggestions to a company, we are going to evaluate that company. Where are you? What are you doing right now? What are you great at? Don't stop doing that. What are you all right at, but we can improve? What are you not doing at all that you should be doing? Right? What are your wins? What are your improvement areas? And what are your blind spots? Let's figure that out. Let's figure out at what capacity your company is working. And in what areas what's their capacity in those areas? If the bucket of capacity is 100%, where are you? Are you at 23%, but everybody's super busy in your company? Because if that's the case, then that means we're probably super busy doing a lot of stuff. This is probably one of those companies that has 5 or 6 meetings a week. Everybody's busy meeting, but the company's only functioning at 23% of its capacity. What lens does your team see your company as? Everybody has an opinion about your company. Everybody inside of the company, anybody who engages with it outside of the company. Wouldn't it be important to know what their opinion is? Because their opinion, especially when they're inside of your company, drives their decision making. It's going to determine whether or not they come to work. It's going to determine whether or not while they're at work, are they going to give it their best? Are you going to do your best work? When I do orientations, when we hire new folks into the company, one of the things that I tell them is your name is on this work that you do. So the question is, how valuable to you is your name?
Love that. That's great.
If somebody engaged your work, what would they learn about you? Would they learn that you're satisfied with status quo, just getting it done? Or would they learn that you are really focused on making sure you do things right and you do them well? Because everything you do every day is a breadcrumb. And those breadcrumbs help people understand who you are, what you do, and how you function. And your work here is one of those breadcrumbs. What do you want me to know about you? If I never engaged you, if I never had an opportunity to have a conversation with you, and all I got to do was look at your body of work, what would it tell me about you? And what would you want it to tell me about you? If we look at it that way, it's a way different way of looking at it.
But you could look at that. That's a great It's a great question to ask somebody or a great way to a great lens to look at it because I mean, you could do that with the CEO and everybody along the path within the organization. Is how do they see what they're doing, and are they willing to put forth the appropriate effort? We all have good days and bad days. That's not the point. It's what is the work? What does that work represent? I mean, that's a great way to look at it. So one of the things, so we have, CEOs and entrepreneurs and senior executives listening to the podcast. And I mean, you've said, I mean, you got a great story. You got all of these ideas and these tools to use to be able to help somebody just think differently about what they're doing. And sometimes that's just what the entrepreneur needs, is to have somebody help them take a different perspective and kind of look around the corner differently. So, and I think you mentioned to me, like in the green room, so to speak, that you have a way for somebody to start. Can you talk a little bit about that, for somebody can reach out to you and sort of start that journey with you? What's the best way?
Absolutely. So over the years, so I've been coaching for 30 years, and over the years, there's just some tools that I've learned to use over and over and over again that get results. And so last year, I decided to to create a checklist, so to speak, for CEOs and executives to run through, score themselves, to want to see where am I. It's very broad, but it will give you an idea of where you are in all areas of your business, and it'll give you a score, and then it'll tell you where you fit in that range. Well, they can download that for free on our website. It won't be there long for free, but they can go to reddevelopmentgroup.com and download that. The thing that's great about this tool, I've used it probably for the last 17 years, all the boxes collectively. The great thing is it's going to cause you to think about things that you hadn't really thought about. You may have thought about them before, but it's been a while. And you're like, ooh, I forgot. I need to think about that. But it also allows you to take an inventory. When you take that inventory, then it's going to tell you who you need. It should help you to start to formulate the right questions to ask of your CFO, right? The right questions to ask of your HR director, the right questions to ask of the vendor that is supplying you with materials. It's going to tell you, hey, your current CFO out of these 10 boxes is able to manage 2 or 3 of them. Should you keep them? Mm-hmm. Is now the question. But then it allows you to go have a conversation to say, there's 8 more boxes that we have to check. Do you have the capacity to check those boxes? If the answer is yes or no, you can decide, well, we'll get them some additional training, or we'll bring on another staff person, or they might go, I don't want to do that. And that, if they say that, then what you understand then is it's time to separate. But that doesn't mean that they're bad, right, or you're bad. That just means that we have work that has to get done, and this isn't the work you want to do, but we still have to get it done. But when you go to hire somebody, now you know what you need. I know I need somebody who can check all of these boxes. You might not need it. You might need somebody to check 8 of the boxes because the other 2 boxes are being handled by someone else. Right?
But
at least
they're getting the information, and I've always believed that entrepreneurs, where they have the right data, and they're viewing things from the proper perspective, they know how to make good decisions, and they can make the hard decisions for the right reasons. That person might be in the wrong seat. They might need to upskill some competencies. They might need some more resources. You get to decide if you can deliver that, if you have the time or whatever. But when they have the right information, they make the good decisions. It's when they're making decisions in a vacuum, or when it's really bad, is they're making decisions in a vacuum and they don't realize it. and you're able
Yes.
to shine a light on in those various areas. And all they got to do is go to reddevelopmentgroup.com, and then that pop up will come in, and they can just download that and start to work through it. And what's the best
Absolutely.
way to reach out to you after they've done that and they're like, "Holy crap, I got some trouble here, Colette"? Um, is the email, LinkedIn, the website? What? How do they get a hold of you the best way?
They can definitely email me at Collette at reddevelopmentgroup.com. They also they can subscribe to our newsletter. I do a column called Dear Coach Red, like the old Dear Abby column, which I love. And so we get people who send me problems, and I'll answer them in the Dear Red column. I'll tell them what the problem is, and then on our blog, I'll go and give the answer to that. Of course, you never reveal anybody's name. Their name is always whatever the problem is.
That's awesome.
So that's another way to engage with us. LinkedIn, of course, we're there. Um, but the easiest way is going to reddevelopmentgroup.com, or shooting me an email, or giving us a call. You can still, we're still old fashioned in that way. We still answer
You
the
paid the
phone.
phone bill, so you got your phone, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we pay the phone bill for sure. Yeah.
I love that. That's a great blog. That's a great way to approach the blog is actually being helpful with real people's problems, real problems, and the people that are brave enough to ask the question can get a specific answer, and the rest of the folks can kind of learn from other people's positions. That's cool. I love that. That's great. Um,
Yeah. I- I'll give you a sneak peek, Walter. This newsletter is the problem is, or the title is, $14,000 later.
hmm,
We got someone who sent us a message about having the wrong type of corporate structure, and not finding out until that company was making lots of money, and then it cost them 14,000. It could have cost them 20, but it cost them 14,000. Plus that's just the start. That's the start of it. That's not the whole of it. It's going to cost them more money. So I'm solving that
awesome.
problem, or talking about that issue.
Awesome.
Hmm.
So let me ask this question. Ask this of all the guests. Does Colette have a relationship, past or present, with cigars?
I do. What's interesting is, um, my guy owns a cigar lounge, and so I'm there near almost every day, and I get to have. I don't smoke personally, but I get to have these very rich conversations, because typically that environment, it kind of nurtures and cultivates that, and so I get to have these really great conversations. But my journey with cigars started with my grandfather, who was an avid cigar smoker, and still I can still kind of smell his cigar all of these years later. So yeah, cigars are pretty um, ingrained in my life.
Awesome. I had a lady tell me a story the other day, and I asked that question. I was fully anticipating her to say, I don't like cigars. I don't want anything to do with them. And she doesn't like cigars, and she doesn't smoke them. But she told this really heartfelt story about, like, she grabbed her grandfather's hat and brought it out, and this was my grandfather's hat, and I can still smell cigars. And anytime I smell a cigar, I'm taken back to a 10-year-old girl sitting on the porch with my grandfather, talking about life.
Yeah.
And they do, a cigar lounge, a cigar room, whatever we want to call it. It does nurture, because people sort of relax, slow down, and have, I don't know, I've had some great conversations with people that I never knew that have become friends. And you immediately have camaraderie, just
Yeah.
just sitting there, because you're in a place doing something that's similar. And sometimes we can throw a little cocktails in the mix, and we're we're even more relaxed. So that's a great story. I appreciate
Hmm.
that. So again,
Yeah.
folks can go to reddevelopmentgroup.com, look for that little pop up, and then take it's basically a survey questionnaire that helps people think about things a little differently. And then once they've done that, it's a great time for you to have a conversation with Collette. So, anything else that we should add to
Absolutely.
this before we wrap up?
Um, yeah, just watch out for what we're doing. They can find, I'm in a lot of places. YouTube is a really great place to find me because I'm having lots of amazing conversations like this with a lot of people. And so, yeah, yeah, just look out. We always have something out there that's going on.
Awesome. All right, I appreciate it. Best of luck. Thanks for taking the time. This was a fun conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.